Good evening, everybody, and welcome to DCSD Parent University License to Survive webinar. I'm so glad that you could join us this evening. If you would, please take a moment to head to slido.com or scan the QR code on the screen. That will enable you to participate in the upcoming polls, surveys, and Q&A at the end of this webinar. And if you're having any issues or have any questions, just go ahead and send us a message through the chat. And so we're always excited to partner with our community partners. Like always, all of like this series would not be possible without our partners at Sky Ridge Medical Center. And tonight, I'm very grateful to say that we also have Theo Mink, the Executive Director of the South Metro Safety Foundation, joining us. And so he's going to take us through a lot of content that is good for both parents and for teens. So hopefully you'll leave with a better understanding of the learning to drive process, of the graduated driver's licensing process, how parents can become more effectively involved, what to teach, where and how, and how to keep your driver's license. There's so much to this incredibly big picture. So I am going to activate a few polls here that we can kind of get to know each other a little bit more and warm up for the evening. So right now, our first question is, does your new driver have their driver's permit? So our yeses are slightly, are gaining a little bit. Again, you can input your answer at slido.com. And I'm going to activate another poll here and see where we're at see what everyone's thinking there. So how familiar are you with the driver's license, with the graduated driver's licensing process? So looking at like kind of unfamiliar, like maybe you have an idea of what's going on, or maybe you are completely new to this and you have no clue. Like, please go ahead and share. Now, the more information that we have, the better we can help you guys out. So it looks like we have most people who are, they're unfamiliar, but maybe they have a little understanding, but a little bit of background. Okay, so here's a more fun one. Complete this in your response. When I think about teaching my teen how to drive, I feel excited, fine, okay. Anxious, terrified, nervous. Okay, we're getting a lot of that. Overwhelmed, excited, completely terrified. Okay, uneasy. Okay. Well, I'm hoping that during this webinar, we can soothe some of that anxiety, calm some of that nervousness, and you'll walk away feeling a lot more confident about the upcoming process. So I'm going to get off here and allow Theo to take over so he can introduce himself and get to the real meat of the issue. Theo, take it away.
Well, navigating all those buttons. I'll let you see a video of me real quick. This is Theo Mink with the South Metro Safety Foundation. Previously, I was a Parker police officer for 15 years, was the lead driving instructor for the department for 10 of those years, and then worked with the South Metro Safety Foundation to help develop their driving program, their teen driving programs. In May of 2020, I took over as executive director with the Safety Foundation. So I've been with the Safety Foundation actually since about 2006. I have a presentation, but it looks like it's not allowing me to share that. Stacy, it's saying host disabled participant screen sharing. Is there a way
I'm
to turn
sorry
that on?
about that. I'll get that fixed.
There we
All
go.
right, try now.
So we have a lot to share today. We have a lot to go over with the presentation. Normally we do this in person, and I have a couple of, well, that didn't work. A couple of Douglas County deputies that teach with me, in an auditorium full of people. To be honest with you, I'm more comfortable in front of people than I am in front of my computer screen doing this. So do forgive me for that. So our overall goals of this this program is to cover the permit process, the licensing phase, team driving liability, and then we'll talk about some of the risks. First off, who we are is South Metro Safety Foundation. You'll see the collage of pictures. We offer CPR, babysitting, youth safety classes, car seat inspections, the driving program, our teen driving program, a driver's awareness program to allow students to get their permit at 15 and a half. And we are also beginning a new senior safety program, both for seniors who are at home and also family members who care for seniors as well. We do this in partnership with South Metro Fire Rescue. We are the nonprofit partner to South Metro Fire. So everything that we do is kind of in conjunction with their risk reduction team. And they're the ones who are out in the community educating students, kids in schools and different various things like that. Let's see. So let's dive into the meat and potatoes of this whole thing. It's the permit process. I think this is what most of you are here for. The permit process is fairly convoluted in the state of Colorado. It's effective for what it's meant to do, which is to save lives, save drivers' lives. But there is a lot to it. The first thing that you want to have is going to be the Colorado Driver's Handbook. You used to be able to walk into any DMV and pick this up. They don't have hard copies available anymore. It's on their website. The thing to understand about all of the driving programs in the state is they're run by the Department of Revenue. So if you've ever paid your taxes through the state, Department of Revenue is different to deal with, and their driving programs the same way. So in order to find this driver's handbook, it's fairly difficult on their website. So what I've done is I actually have it downloaded. You'll see the QR code here. I have a packet of materials that includes this handbook, some parent references, parent handbooks, a basic curriculum that a parent can handle, driver's schools in the state of Colorado and different various contacts for them under this QR code. And then Stacy will also email that link to if you're not able to scan the QR code and get that. The idea is to have resources. The second thing that you want to look at, and this is something to consider not only for before taking the permit or before taking any sort of classes, but then obviously before you go and you actually take the permit test, is there are some pre-tests, and you'll see the link for that here, and then also the QR code links to that as well. It's a third-party site. It is linked through the Department of Revenue website to this for pre-tests, so they're approved, but this is a for-profit company that'll try to get you to buy stuff, but they do have free pre-tests on there. If you click where it says next test and diagnostic test, that'll help you get there.
So, kids getting a driver's license, huh? Yeah, clear the road. Seriously though, it's scary stuff. You're a new driver hurtling down the highway, to say nothing of all the new costs you may be facing. Oh boy. But really, look at the statistics. Drivers between the ages of 15 and 19 are much more likely to experience a collision. You don't want that. I don't want that. Heck, the government doesn't want that. And that's why states nationwide have adopted graduated driver licensing regulations. I know it sounds complicated, but don't worry, I'm here to help. Welcome to Graduated Driver Licensing Made Simple. Now, each state has its own set of specific rules and regulations, but today we're taking a look at Colorado. Meet Daniel and his mom, Kay. They're about to start on the great adventure of the GDL. Daniel turned 15 yesterday. In Colorado, this means he's just old enough to apply for his driver education permit. To do this, he must first be enrolled in driver's education. Of course, if Daniel opted to not take the 30 hours of driver's education, he can wait till he's 15 years and 6 months old and have the option to just take the 4-hour driver's awareness course. If he chose to wait, he would then be applying for a driver awareness permit, or he can wait until he's 16 and receive a minor instruction permit and not have to take any courses. Fortunately, he is enrolled in driver's education, and he and his mom have even spent time together studying this year's Colorado Driver Handbook. All they have to do now is head down to the local DMV, where they'll provide documents of identification and proof of completion of driver's education. Here, Daniel will take a vision screening test and a knowledge exam, and his mom will sign an affidavit of guardianship and liability. 25 harrowing questions later, Daniel is a proud learner's permit recipient. So what now? Now the fun part. Daniel needs to clock 50 hours of supervised driving time with his mom, a driving instructor, or a designated alternate permit supervisor in case the parent doesn't have a valid driver's license. Kay will need to sign off on an official DMV log of these hours, stating that Daniel has indeed been practicing his lane changes and three-point turns. The supervised driving period is really important because it gives experienced drivers a chance to make sure that their protege is learning excellent safety practices behind the wheel. Now, Daniel can drive with a licensed adult over the age of 21 with his mom's permission, but it will not count towards the 50 hours. Now that he's got his permit, Daniel needs to spend the next 12 months working on his driving abilities under his mom's watchful eye before moving on to the next phase. Meet Amanda and her uncle Jason. Amanda is 16, has completed her driver's training, and just spent the last 12 months learning Jason's best tips and tricks for how to pull off the perfect parallel parking job, among other vital rules of the road. Since she is younger than 16 years and 6 months, she'll need to provide a 6-hour certificate from the driver's education school. Nevertheless, Amanda is now ready to embark on that vital rite of passage, the road test. She and Jason head to the DMV, where Amanda will show off her shiny new driving skills.
All right, so that video gives a quick rundown of the permit process, and it is not a, like I said, it's a lot to follow, and that video goes pretty quick. So we'll try to unpack it as best as we can here in terms that are a little bit easier to follow. So the earliest that a teenager can start to get their permit is going to be 14 years and 6 months. What they'll need to do is complete a 30-hour driver's education course. It's going to be the standard full-time driver's ed course. They can start that at 14 and a half. Once they turn 15, they can apply for their permit. Once they get their permit, they have to, well, before they get the permit, they have to pass a written test. Some of the schools actually will provide the test, and then you just have to go to the DMV to get the permit. After the permit's received, so from 15 to 16, they'll need to log 50 hours of drive time with the parents, with 10 of those hours being at night. They'll also need to attend 6 hours of behind the wheel lessons through that driver's ed school that they attended the 30-hour classroom portion with. And this gets broken up into either 2 or 3 hour sessions, depending on the schools. When you're shopping around for schools, make sure that they have the 30-hour driver's education course and they have the 6 hour behind the wheel time, and whatever you're purchasing, the package is all combined. Some schools will offer like 30 hours of the driver's education course, either in person or virtual, but they won't offer the 6 hour. They'll charge that separately for quite a bit more. The whole package, the average cost right now is going to be in the $500 range to get all of that. Just pay attention. One of the things too that I also suggest to parents when it comes to the 30-hour driver's education course, do in person. Studies have shown that that teenagers tend to retain more information, like 90% more information from the in-person driver's ed classes than they do from the virtual ones. So after they've completed those requirements with the 50 hours of drive time, the 6 hours behind the wheel time, then they can apply for their driver's license after having their permit for 12 full months. They must at that point pass the drive test, which is a actual get behind the wheel and drive with the person from the DMV. If they want to start a little bit later, and if you want to save a little bit of money, there is an option to get the permit at 15 and 6 months. What they would need to do is attend a 4-hour driver's awareness program. This is a program that we offer for $80, or they can still attend the 30-hour driver's education course. This class is a good alternative if you need to save money, but if I were to say the best thing to do is start them early, go through as much training as you possibly can, because unfortunately there just isn't much available, and try to prepare them as much as you can. But this is a good alternative if $500 is a little bit too much. So basically what will happen at 15 and 6 months, they attend the 4-hour driver's awareness program. Then they can apply for their permit at the DMV, pass a written test. And then they'll need to log that 50 hours of drive time with parents, again, with that 10-hour at night. They don't have to take the 6 hours of behind the wheel lessons. That's optional. Again, I suggest it, but I would buy the full 30-hour package with the 6 hours. After they've had their permit for 12 full months, they can apply for their license. So if they get their permit at 15 and a half, they have to wait until they're 16 and a half to get their permit. And same thing, if they get their permit at 16, they have to wait until they're 17 to get their permit. The last option, and this is not my favorite option, but it is possible. They can get their permit with no training required at 16 years old. Basically, you just walk into the DMV, apply for the permit, take the written test. You have to pass it, obviously. And then the same thing applies with the 50 hours of drive time with parents. And then after they've held their permit for 12 full months, then they can go and apply for their license. So basically they would have their permit from 16. At 17, they'd be eligible for their driver's license without any additional education. So when you go in to get your permit, these are the documents that you need. This is one of the more frequently asked questions that we get, is what you need to take with you. Certified birth certificate, social security card. I had this issue with my daughter, is my wife actually laminated the social security card. So make sure it's not laminated. They wouldn't accept the laminated social security card. It actually says on the card, don't laminate. You can take a passport, and then proof of insurance, and then 2 documents proving your residence, so bills or paycheck stubs, something like that. And then proof of enrollment in one of the state approved drivers programs. So either the driver's awareness program or the 30-hour driving class. They'll need to go through the vision test. They'll need to take the written test. And then there's going to be an affidavit of liability. And this is for parents. The standards on this changed a little bit, but essentially for the parents or guardians, you're going to sign this, and you're basically going to say that you are responsible for anything that your new driver does. So let's say they get their permit at 15, and they're driving and all that stuff. They get their license at 16, and they go out and have a really good time, and they crash and they kill some people. Unfortunately, they're going to be held criminally liable for that, but parents, you are also going to be civilly liable for that. And that you're responsible for that up until the age of 18. When they turn 18, then you're released from the majority of liability from your, hopefully not by then, newer drivers. One thing that's kind of interesting about the affidavit of liability, though, is as a parent, you can revoke it at any point. So let's say you're having some issue with your teens, they're not getting good grades, or there's some behavioral issues and you're just not comfortable with them driving or whatever, you can go into the DMV and you can actually revoke that affidavit of liability, which effectively removes their driving privileges. They won't be able to drive until they're Something to make sure that that your kids know. It's always kind of a good tool to remind them of that. So the licensing phase, we talk about the GDL or graduated driver licensing laws. They really came into effect around 2005, and they started planning this whole process back in the late 90s, when there was a number of teenage drivers that were killed, particularly passengers. I put this in here. This is the stat. This is basically a 20-year stat showing traffic fatalities and how they've gone up and how they've gone down. And you'll notice from 2003 up to about 2006, they're fairly high, and then they start to come down in 2006, between 2005 and 2006. And that's when the graduated driver's license laws actually came into effect. What they found, and I don't have the stats for teenage fatalities exactly, but they did show that there was a reduction of teenage driver fatalities of about 47% in that time period when they were introduced, and that maintained to be the case even up until now. They're much lower than they were in the late 90s and the early 2000s. As you can see, fatalities are starting to go up. I think there are other contributing factors to that, but it's something that's interesting to know that the purpose of these rules is to save lives, and they are effective in doing that. It puts, as you can see in the second little bubble there, it puts more control in the permitting and licensing process, which I think is something that's very necessary. Not only for, I don't want to say the state to control it, because that's not necessarily true, but for the parents to have control over that process. Here are some restrictions. When they have their license for the first 6 months, they cannot have anyone under the age of 21 in the car with them. They can have adults as passengers, but they cannot have anyone under the age of 21. Now, there is a exception to this. So if it's transporting a younger sibling to and from school, or to and from a doctor's appointment, or something to that effect. However, my suggestion is to be pretty weary of allowing that to happen, unless it's like a last minute sort of thing. You want to have them spend as much time in that car as they can, get comfortable alone before you start introducing those distractions. After 6 months, they can have one passenger under 21. And that's going to be only one passenger in the front seat. Again, with that sibling exception that is allowed in there, but they can have a friend now riding in the passenger seat. So as you can see here, there's the more passengers they have, the higher the risk of an accident. So we do want to watch that as closely as possible. And this is where a lot of the GDL laws were most effective in reducing fatalities, was the passengers and limiting that distraction, and you didn't have as many teenage drivers or passengers that were killed from this period. Seatbelts. This is kind of a no-brainer in my mind, but all occupants must wear seatbelts. There is a rule in the state of Colorado that if you have an adult driver and you have someone who's over the age of 18 in the back seat, the backseat passenger does not have to have a seatbelt on if they are over the age of 18. Not smart, but it is in the law. However, if you have a teenage driver and you have an adult in the back seat, the adult needs to wear a seatbelt. 55% of teens that were in accidents weren't wearing seatbelts. That's a large number. No cell phone usage while driving if under the age of 18. This is a tough one, and we're going to talk a little bit more about this as we keep going. But it's important to get that cell phone put away and not use it at all. True or false? Drivers under the age of 18 can legally use voice-activated functions on a phone while driving. Take a minute to think about that. Get your answers in your head. They cannot. It's false. No phone usage while driving for those under the age of 18. Now, mapping systems that are integrated into the car that work with your cell phone, there is actually an exception for that where they can use that for getting directions. But no phone calls, no texting, no music off of your cell phone. Distracted driving. 51% of teens admit to sending or receiving text messages while driving, and 66% admit to using their cell phone while driving. What's interesting, in a study that I saw, it was a couple of years ago, I guess now, adults and parents are actually in the same sort of percentage. So there's a good number of adults and parents, obviously, that are using their cell phone as well. Cell phone, using your cell phone and driving is very similar to drunk driving. Having been a police officer and been out doing traffic enforcement and watching how drivers drive, it's very distinctive when someone is under the influence of alcohol, the way that they drive, the way that the car kind of moves and it weaves in the lanes, or the way the driver behaves. It's very similar if the driver is distracted by their cell phone. I followed a girl a number of years ago, and her driving was terrible. I was in my personal car. I called it in. I was going into work. I called it into my coworkers to pull her over because she was all over the road. Her speed was varying from 20 miles per hour to 80 miles an hour on Parker Road. She was staying at stoplights too long as they turned green. She was luckily stopping at them, which was good. But I was convinced that she was under the influence of something. And when one of my coworkers pulled her over, she had her tablet and she was vlogging while she drove. So this works really well when we do the in-person class. If you want to try it while you're sitting here listening to this, if you aren't watching this on your cell phone, take out your cell phone real quick. And when we go to the next slide, you'll see basically a football field with a car on it. And when we start, you'll hear the sound of a horn. When you do that, I want you to pull up a contact and text the message home in 10. Obviously, you can't, I mean, you can, if you want, raise your hand when you hit send, but I won't see it. But just for your own kind of knowledge to know where you're at. So get ready and go. So some of you may have been able to send that text, some of you didn't. The average text takes 4.6 seconds to send. It also takes 4.6 seconds at 55 miles per hour to travel 100 yards. So if you think about what it takes to basically divide your attention from driving down to your cell phone, formulate words, type them out on your cell phone, you're basically not paying attention to the road for 4.6 seconds or more. In that time period, you've gone the entire distance of a football field. Now, a lot can happen in that time. As far as curfews go, there's going to be, with their license, there's going to be no driving from midnight to 5 a.m. There are exceptions, as you can see below, a statement of work or from school. Parents present in the vehicle, or if there's a medical emergency. Now, most jobs shouldn't be holding a teenager past midnight. If they are, then I would definitely be questioning that. Most schools, same sort of thing. And then medical emergencies, if you're driving somebody to the hospital who's having a medical emergency, that's going to be an issue. Your best bet is just to call 911 and have the professionals come and pick them up and take them. As you can see, 41% of fatal accidents happen between 9 p.m. and 6 a.m. Drunk driving, obviously, there's zero tolerance for drunk driving. Actually, the DUI rules for a teenager is a little bit more strict than it is for an adult as far as what the alcohol levels have to be. It's basically the comparable to half a beer, somewhere in that range, for what we call a baby DUI. they still will face fines of upwards of about $12,000, lose their license until basically they're an adult. And that applies to adults as well, as far as those penalties go. The interesting thing about alcohol and drugs is statistics for teenage use have actually gone down, which is a good thing. I'm glad to see that. The thing I think is the filler, though, is cell phone usage, where they have their cell phone, and what people are finding with the cell phone is using that with social media and interacting with your friends on your cell phone. It releases dopamine, which is basically a drug that makes you feel good, or a chemical that makes you feel good that's released naturally by your body. So essentially they have their cell phone now, which is a dopamine button. They get a like on one of their social medias, or they get a message or something like that, and then automatically they get flooded with this awesome chemical that makes them feel great, which adds to some addiction to that phone, and some of the issues that now we're seeing with driving. So instead of seeing as much DUI and DUID with teenage drivers, now we're seeing distracted driving, where they have their cell phone. And again, like we talked about, the driving actions for that is very similar to someone who's under the influence of a chemical substance. Now they're just distracted, and they're trying to get their dopamine hit off of the phone. It becomes very difficult for them to put that phone down. For parents out there, if you've ever tried to take your phone away from your teenager, it's like a bomb went off. It's like the worst thing in the world. It's interesting. We had a few blowouts with my daughter with that. As a police officer, I went to one call. I went to numerous calls, obviously, with teenagers, but I went to this one that was very notable, of this girl. She was 16 years old. She had her cell phone taken away from her. And I think it was for grades. It was the parents were right to do it. She had a total meltdown. She went up to her room, was upset, decided that she was going to walk to Walmart to get a phone. So she went out her second story window, and it was kind of a high house, went out her second story window, jumped, and broke her leg. Because she was so driven, she needed to get a phone because she needed her fix. She needed to be connected. I look at that, and I look at drug addicts that we've dealt with. Opioids and heroin and things like that were fairly prominent in the last few years of law enforcement. We go to a lot of ODs where people are overdosing on those substances, and we carried a thing called Narcan, which is basically a nose spray that counteracts the effects of opioids and can bring someone out of a overdose very quickly and save their life. I remember going to one call in particular where this gentleman was ODing. He was coring, so his heart was starting to stop, wasn't breathing. He was like an ashen gray, looked dead. Administered 2 doses of Narcan, woke him right up. He started to fight with us because we took his high away, similar to some of these teenagers who lose their phones. So it's very interesting, what the phone has, the effect that phones have on our teenagers, and kind of how it's replacing drugs and alcohol. Teen driving liability. This is just some stats as far as the percentage of teen passenger deaths caused by teen drivers, fairly high. Teens that were impaired by drugs and alcohol. And then the percentage of male drivers that were speeding 15 to 20 miles an hour over. Tickets in court. So these are some of the penalties that a teenage driver could face if they get a ticket. So community service has minimum fines of $65. I don't really know anyone that has fines of $65. It's going to be more in the $100+ range now. And then driver's license suspension. We work with the courts so that we actually get kids who are first-time offenders will actually go through our teen crash avoidance class as part of their court requirement. So total points that a teenager has when they first start driving. So anyone under the age of 18, we start with 6 points, not actually that you have an accumulation of 6 points, but it's you can collect 6 points in tickets before you lose your license. Typical speeding ticket and most violations are going to be worth 4 points. That can get pled down in the court sometimes, but the average number is going to be 4 points. Now, if they violate the GDL laws by having a passenger in the car that they're not supposed to have. So let's say they've had their license for under 6 months and they have one person in the car, they get pulled over for speeding. So now you're looking at 4-point violation for the speeding and then an additional 2-point violation for that GDL infraction for having that one person in the car. Now our SROs who work by high schools, they see this, and then more commonly they see more passengers in the car. So for every passenger that is in the car violating GDL laws, it's an additional 2 points. So if this new driver with less than 6 months of experience with their driver's license has 3 passengers on board, they get pulled over for speeding, that's a 10-point violation. So they exceed their 6 points by 4, by almost double, and they probably won't get their license back until they're 18. So very, very serious penalties for those GDL violations. There are also criminal charges that a new driver can face. Hit and run, that's common. If you get into an accident and you decide to leave because you get scared, that's something that is fairly common. You don't want to do that. That increases your potential violations pretty high, pretty far, and even goes into kind of the misdemeanor range rather than just a traffic offense or infraction. We talked about DUI, DWI, and then reckless driving. Reckless driving is a big one too for new drivers. Where they get this car, it's fast. They get to go from one place to another. It's seemingly easy to control under most circumstances. In reality, it's not when you get into those, what we call emergency situations. And they're wanting to push those limits. And that happens more frequently than we like to see. So reckless driving is a pretty big one. Reckless driving in itself is 8-point violation. So fairly high if they're racing down the road and get pulled over because they're going 30 miles an hour over the speed limit and weaving in and out of traffic, causing danger to everybody else on the road. Fairly high as far as that goes, but then that's also a jailable offense as well. They can be taken to, if they're an adult, taken to the county jail or taken to the juvenile holding facility. Civil liability, and this is really for parents to pay real close attention to because we talked about that affidavit of liability. This is where this can start to hit you pretty hard if your teenage driver is that one that is going 30 miles an hour over the speed limit, weaving in and out of traffic and get into an accident, or they even violate GDL laws, get into an accident and hurt the passenger that's not supposed to be with them. You see quite a few lawsuits with associated with this, with civil liability. Colorado allows 25% of your wages, you as the parent, your wages to be garnished for as long as necessary to pay whatever that award is that you see in civil court. And then once the teenager who's responsible for the accident are of age and working, and this hasn't been paid off, their wages can be garnished as well. 14% of accidents in the state of Colorado, accident lawsuits in the state of Colorado settle for $1 million or more. And that's serious bodily injury or fatal accidents. That's a pretty high number. So when you go back and you look at that $1 million settlement from civil court, you say, well, I've got insurance. My insurance would pay for that. State liability minimum per occurrence is only $50,000. So they'll pay $50,000 if you get the minimum, but then you're stuck with the $950,000 that's remaining from that settlement. So it's always good to shop around, look at different insurance policies, and potentially get an umbrella policy so that you can cover your total net worth. Here's a scenario. This is one of our Douglas County traffic units put this together based on an actual experience that they had, an accident that they took. So it was basically you had vehicle A with 3 teens, vehicle B with 4 teens. They were leaving the high school in one of the Douglas County high schools. During the accident, you had 5 teens that were transported to the emergency room. The average cost for the transport is $1,100. So total cost for all 5 is $5,500. You have 3 teens who made it to the ER. Your standard ER visit's going to be in the $15,500 range. So for all 3 of those teens in the ER, $46,000. You had 2 teens with traumatic injuries. The average cost for that is going to be $35,700 per teen. So total of $71,430. Pain and suffering, which is something that you will actually be accountable for, 3 times the medical bills. So $353,000 for pain and suffering for some of those involved in the accident. So you're going to be looking at a total expense of $476,536. Now, again, you say I have insurance, my insurance company will pay this, but if you have the state minimum, you're still stuck with $426,000 that you will need to pay back. So talk to your insurance agent, find what's comfortable for you. I would go on the high end just to be safe. They call it insurance. It's good insurance, that you won't go broke because your new driver did something stupid and affected you and the rest of your family for the rest of your life. Parent involvement is a key to this process. This is where it gets to be a little bit difficult. We get a lot of questions in regards to this, and I try to provide as much information to parents as I possibly can, because being a driving instructor and then also being a parent who's gone through this process, it's hard and it's confusing. It's scary. There's a lot of things that can happen. There's a lot of things to know. Essentially, you as a parent are going to be the primary instructor for your teenager. And that's a hard pill to swallow. I mean, most adults are like, yeah, I'm a good driver. I know how to do this. And you might be a fair driver, but when it comes to teaching somebody else how to drive, it's a whole different animal. Even for me, I struggled with my daughter. I've taught a couple thousand kids in our crash avoidance class. I've taught about 1,500 hours worth of law enforcement driving classes to cops, which is interesting. It's a whole different thing to think about that as well. And when I taught my daughter, it was difficult. It was a challenge. It was hard to get through to her. But understanding that parents that don't or that teenagers that don't have that involvement from parents, 4 times more likely to have a traffic violation and 7 times more likely to be in a crash. This is one of the things that is suggested, and this will be in that handout packet that Stacy will email the link to tomorrow. There's this, it's a parent teen driving contract. So it's where you can set limits when they get their license, as far as what your level of comfort is with them and for them. And, you can even put things in there that you maintain a certain GPA or whatever. I've seen parents do that. Just go up in levels as far as how much they're able to do. So for the first 3 months, they need to be home at sundown. They can only drive on neighborhood roads. They can't drive in inclement weather while they're alone. With you, that's going to be a different story. Distracted driving apps. This will also be in that packet where there's some suggested apps, and there are more of them out there now. This list is actually a couple years old. I haven't updated it yet. But there are apps that you can download to your teen's cell phone that will dramatically restrict what they can do on that phone while it's in motion in a car. Some insurance companies were even handing out what's basically a Faraday bag that kills any sort of signal that cell phone will get when you put it inside the bag, so that they can't send or receive anything while they're driving, so they can remove that temptation to pick up the phone and get that dopamine hit. Get asked a lot about the type of car. When we do our teen crash avoidance classes, and a little bit more about that class, because we didn't really cover it, but it's one of those that we've been offering since about 2006. We have a specialized facility that's designed for this, that's associated with the South Metro Fire Training Facility in Parker. And we run these classes about 2 a month with students. It's taught by law enforcement officers, some former coworkers, some other people that I have dealt with through the years who are interested in coming to teach, that I know are competent and do a great job. And we teach basically advanced driving. It's based on what police officers learn in the police academies, based on post. And one of the requirements is that they bring their own cars out, because I want them to understand what that car can do in an emergency situation. If it starts to slide, I want them to understand what systems they have that can help mitigate the loss of traction. I want them to understand how that car brakes, how it steers, everything, so that they can be more comfortable with it. So with that, I've gotten to see a lot of different cars out on the driving pad during these classes, and kind of have a good sense of what is a good choice and what is not. When you get down to it, though, you want to buy the safest car that you can afford. Cars built within the last 10 years have better safety systems than they do anything previous from that. And really they're showing that advances in automotive technology has improved so much more in the last 10 years than it had in the previous 90. And a lot of that has to do with these safety systems. A lot of folks like to get the bigger vehicles, like the pickup trucks, the big SUVs, because a big hunk of metal is going to be safer. You're going to encase your teenager in as much steel as possible to keep them safe. That's true to a point. Those larger vehicles actually don't hold up quite as well in a crash, as far as like the interior, the energy that's transferred to basically the driver or the occupants of the vehicle. They don't stand up to that, because they don't have quite the buffer that some of the smaller cars have, with what's called like crumple zones, where it absorbs the impact, so that impact isn't being transferred into the cabin, because that energy that's transferred into the cabin can actually cause injuries to drivers as well. So those big chunks of steel are more rigid. They don't absorb the impact quite as well, and drivers end up absorbing that. They're also bigger, they're heavier, they don't handle as well. So one of the big issues that we see with the larger vehicles, when we start to slide them around a little bit in the skid control exercises, is they are very hard to maintain control of, because you have all of that mass that's rotating. It becomes very taxing on that new driver to regain control of that car. So out on the roadway, if it's snowy outside and they start to slide, that car is going to spin out, and all sorts of bad things might happen with the larger vehicles. I like smaller cars to start off with. All-wheel drive, being Colorado, that sometimes we have snow, sometimes we don't. They're just a good, safe choice for out here. You can get crash test ratings for virtually any car within that 10-year period, and some older. If you go to the website down below, which is the NHTSA government ratings website, sometimes you might even see some of the videos of the crash test, which to me, I find that interesting. But it's always stuff that's good to know. Another thing actually that I do want to add to this is tires. Tires are the most important safety feature in your car. It's basically what keeps you on the road. And so you want to make sure that the tires are in good shape. You don't want to buy cheap tires, and you want to buy tires that are suitable for the environment that you're in. So Colorado, a good set of all-season tires isn't bad. Optimally, you want to have a set of summer tires and a set of winter tires that you swap out, but that's not always economical for people to do. All right, first time behind the wheel. These are just things to look at with your new driver when you put them behind the wheel for the first time. You want to make sure they're sitting properly in the car, that they have seatbelt, adjust the mirrors, and then make sure they understand the location of the controls, windshield wipers, headlights, that sort of thing. Talk about shuffle steering as a steering technique that we like to teach. There are some YouTube videos on this. I may have a video a little bit here in a minute that'll show basically what shuffle steering looks like. But if you look that up on YouTube, you can see it. And of course, with our driving classes, we teach that. Understand braking. So with braking, you want to make sure that you're not treating the brakes as they're an on and off switch. A lot of new drivers tend to do that. You want to rather put constant pressure down on the brakes, but you don't want to push it all the way down to the floor. So you want to understand how much braking force is required to slow the vehicle versus to stop the vehicle. And then understand ABS and what that feels like. So when you apply the brakes hard, especially when it's like snowy and icy outside, the ABS will kick in and it'll cause that brake pedal to vibrate. And it's a safety system. And it's something that's good to understand. Skid recovery is a tough one. There are a couple of classes in Colorado that cover this. There's a skid car up in Brighton, and they sometimes come down. We'll partner with them and they'll do a class out on our pad as well. And then there's an amazing school out in Steamboat that's hosted by Bridgestone, where they actually make icy roads. That one's a little bit expensive, but those are some of the options in Colorado for that. Here's a video on driver setup real quick. See if I can make it work. Maybe not. It was working earlier. I'll send a link to this video and I'll have Stacy include in the packet so you can watch this. This is what we have out on our driving pad for teenagers to get set up before they attend our class, and it's applicable for the first time that they drive or any other time that they drive. So it goes over seating position where the steering wheel needs to be and how to adjust the mirrors, because there's a proper technique to adjusting the mirrors. This is another video that we have on shuffle steering. It's apparently not wanting to play either. I apologize about that. I'll send this link as well. And it goes over shuffle steering as it applies to our crash avoidance course. However, it also gives that description of what shuffle steering is for parents to look at, so you can have that. Here's the hard part for parents. You have basically 50-hour requirement to drive with your kid when they have their permits. It's really easy to say, well, it's a really nice day out today. Let's go for a drive for an hour. But then it's snowy or icy out and be like, I'm real scared. I don't want to do that. I'm not going to take you out. Or I'm not going to take them out. I'll drive. You want to expose them to as much as you possibly can while you're in the car with them. So make plans for some of these less than ideal weather conditions and take them out to drive. Even if you take them out to somewhere that's a little less populated to try out for the first time. One of the suggestions that I have are dirt roads. If you know some more secluded dirt roads to start, take them out there, because you'll start to feel the suspension move. You'll start to feel a little bit of wheel spin. The brakes act a little bit differently when you're on the dirt roads. So it's a good place to start. And then, go out during a rainstorm or go out when the roads are wet so they can feel the difference there. If they're in an isolated spot where it's safe to do so, have them brake hard a couple times so that they can feel it. Another option is larger parking lots. Some of the high schools or churches that have larger parking lots that will be empty during certain times. Take them out there. Don't like spin donuts or do burnouts or anything like that, but go out, drive it 15, 20 miles per hour in the parking lot and apply the brakes when it's snowy and see what the car does. See how it feels. You'll feel the ABS. You'll feel how the brake acts differently. Look for that sort of thing. The more that you can expose them to, the better they're going to be when they're on their own. You don't want them to drive through their very first snowstorm when they're on their own. This is part of that packet as well that Stacy will send you. And this is a basic curriculum for parents to follow. So you have lesson 1, and it breaks down some of the basics of what you want to start with. Lesson 2, it gets to be a little bit more advanced as far as scanning the roadway, entering traffic. watching for pedestrians, any of that sort of stuff, and 3, 4, and 5. So it breaks it down so it's a little bit easier to follow for the first few times that you're driving. And then once you get through this and you feel comfortable, then it's just you're sitting with them while they drive. It gets to be a little bit easier once you cover a lot of the basics. If you do a 30-hour driving class and they have that 6 hours of behind the wheel time with an instructor, that's extremely helpful too, because you can start to kind of match what you're teaching with what they're teaching or what they're going to teach. So ask them for a curriculum of what they're going to teach during each session. And that's always good to have because they're not always going to listen to you. They're your kids. They're more likely to listen to strangers than they are to you. So it's good to have that other person in the car with them from time to time as well to help. And like I said, 50 hours for that 1 year. That's 1 hour per week, less than. Is that enough time for you to be comfortable releasing your kid out into the wild of roads that we have right now with drivers that we have and have them be safe? In my mind, it's not. I would do as much as possible, but I do understand it's hard, it's stressful. But I know that you can do it and you can get through it. And the more that you do, the better off they're going to be. This will also be in that packet. For the state, when they have their permit, they have to log their 50 hours of drive time. The DMV will give you a paper log that you can follow, or you can print one off of their website. They also have a new app that you can log your driving with this, and the information on this is going to be in that packet as well. So you can log it with the cell phone, which makes life a bit easier. So as you can see, the solution to this problem with teenage accidents, teenage fatalities, how you can potentially save your new driver's life is be involved, help them interact, give them as much training, as many tools as you possibly can to make them better, safer drivers on the road. I'm here. We're a nonprofit organization, so I referenced our classes. Understand that our classes are designed to be as cheap as possible. We still have to pay for them to run the classes. We work on getting grants and subsidies to lower that, to make them available to everybody. But there are also other alternatives out there that I strongly suggest looking at. I'm always here. This is my email address. It also has my phone number down below. I'm happy to answer questions. Send me an email and say, I've been driving with my teenager for the past 20 hours and they're just not getting this. Send me a message and I'll help you work with that. That's what we're here to do, is to help you and to help save their lives, to keep them safe. And with that, I will open it back up to Stacy.
Great. Thank you so much, Theo. I always learn so much every time that you come on board with us. One moment. So we do have a Q&A open through Slido. So if you have not hopped on there yet, and you want to ask a question, please do so. Again, that's slido.com, event code L2S. But let's take a look at some questions here. Let's see here. Okay, so we did have a few questions about will we receive the slide deck or these resources after the presentation? Yes. Tomorrow I will be sending out an email with links to everything that Theo has presented, as well as the link to a recording of this webinar. So you will have all of that at your fingertips sometime tomorrow. And so that will also include the driver's handbook and the app to log driving skills and hours. So Theo, how about I run these by you and we can just go through them pretty quickly.
Okay.
So can twins be in the car together?
So that's an interesting question that I've never run into. I would say by the letter of the law, probably not, unless you have one transporting the other one to school, then yeah, then that would fit and work together. by the letter of the law, I would say no, but I would imagine if they got pulled over, it'd be like their twins, their siblings, they can be in the car. I wouldn't see them getting a ticket for that, but it's possible. So, just be leery of that for the first while that you're driving the twins, or your twins are driving.
All right. For kids on an IEP, are there any resources to help with taking the written test?
So the state, the DMV, their main office actually has some resources for that. I don't directly have access to it. If you want to send me an email, if you can, I can look that up. I can get with them and I can get those resources and send them on to you. I know the last I checked, and it was a couple of years ago, there were three entities available that can help with that in the Denver metro.
Okay, if the child is under a guardianship, do the guardians need to take the court order?
Yes, so guardian will take the place of parent. So the guardianship would be the same thing as the parent. So everything that a parent would have to do.
All right, and if both parents are planning on being in the car when the child is logging time, do both parents need to go to the DMV when they apply for the permit?
It used to be yes, but not anymore. So basically the way that it's signed is one parent or one guardian will sign off on that. And it's basically them or an authorized adult is the way that it's worded now.
All right, excellent. Thank you so much. And I want to be respectful of everyone's time. So we're going to wrap it up. I do want to let you guys know that we have a webinar coming up in February 23rd at 5:30 p.m. We're going to talk about post-secondary readiness and everything that DCSD has to offer as far as career and technical education, concurrent enrollment, work-based learning, and especially as you're looking, what does my kid need to do after, or what does my kid want to do after graduating high school? This is a really great place to learn what some of the options are. And we don't have registration open for that just yet, but keep an eye out on social media and in your email inboxes. And if you would be so kind, before you leave Slido, please leave us some feedback on our feedback survey. We'd love to get an idea of how you felt about this webinar, how you felt about using this tool. And other than that, everyone have a safe night. Thanks again for joining us, and we'll see you next time.